Daniel, servant of the living God, are you alive? Did your God protect you?
Saw Daniel, an elder past 80, locked in a den of starving lions. But that scene is only the ending. To understand how he got there, we need to go back 70 years, to a teenager torn from his home. This story isn't just about the past. The book of Daniel is considered the most prophetic in the entire Old Testament. It doesn't just record what happened in Babylon. It announces empires and events that were still to come. Stay until the end. Decades before the fall, the prophet Jeremiah was already warning Jerusalem. If they kept ignoring God, punishment would come through a foreign empire. He repeated that warning year after year, in the squares, in the temple, before kings, but almost no one took him seriously. Jeremiah went even further. The people would remain exiled for exactly 70 years before any return to the Promised Land. Remember that number, because decades later, an old man in Babylon, Daniel will reread that prophecy and realize the end of the exile is near. But kings and priests refused to listen. Some prophets were arrested, others mocked in the city's own streets. Life in Jerusalem went on as usual. Weddings, feasts, business, as if nothing would ever change. No one imagined the world's most feared army was already on its way. Chapter 1 of Daniel opens in 605 BC. The Babylonian army, led by Prince Nebuchadnezzar, surrounds the walls of Jerusalem. The Jews' sacred city cannot withstand the greatest empire on earth. Within days, the Babylonians seize the capital and decide the fate of thousands. Nebuchadnezzar is no ordinary king. He will reign for more than 40 years, the longest and most powerful reign in all of Babylonian history. Nearly every wall, palace, and towering temple in the city was built or expanded on his direct order. Before heading home, Nebuchadnezzar orders the sacred vessels from Jerusalem's temple carried off to Babylon and stored in the treasury of the Babylonian gods. Remember this detail. Decades later, those same sacred vessels will resurface at a royal feast that changes everything. This is only the first wave of prisoners taken to Babylon. Over the next 20 years, 2 more deportations will follow, until Jerusalem is finally destroyed completely and the sacred temple built by Solomon is burned down to its foundations. But Nebuchadnezzar doesn't just want gold and territory. He orders his officers to select, from among the prisoners, only the finest young men of Jewish nobility. Physically flawless, handsome, intelligent, quick to learn. Among those chosen is a teenager named Daniel. There's a political motive behind this choice. By displaying the brightest young men of every conquered nation serving in his own palace, Nebuchadnezzar shows the entire world the scale of his power and lowers the odds of any future revolt led by those noble families. Why would the most powerful king in the world care about teenagers? Because Nebuchadnezzar grasped something brilliant. Conquering territory isn't enough. To truly dominate, you had to capture the brightest minds of every conquered people and turn them into servants of the Babylonian Empire itself. At this point, the Babylonian Empire stretches from the Persian Gulf to the borders of Egypt, controlling nearly every trade route through the region known as the Fertile Crescent. It's the largest and richest territory any single king had ever ruled in that ancient world. The journey begins. Daniel and the other young men walk more than 900 miles across the desert, under a scorching sun and freezing nights. Chained, not knowing their own fate, they leave behind everything they knew. Family, temple, the only land they'd ever set foot on. The trip isn't a straight line through empty desert. The prisoners follow the course of the rivers, passing oases and small towns, on a journey that lasts several full months. Every stop is closely guarded, and any attempt to escape means instant death. After weeks, something staggering rises on the horizon. Babylon's walls are so wide that 2 war chariots can race side by side across the top. The main entrance is the Ishtar Gate, covered in gleaming blue tiles. And above the city, green and impossible, float the Hanging Gardens. The Hanging Gardens Daniel glimpses in the distance were built by Nebuchadnezzar to please his wife, who missed the green mountains of her homeland. Raised on terraces and watered by an intricate irrigation system, they're counted among the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Ishtar Gate, where Daniel and the other young men enter the city, is covered in glazed blue bricks decorated with bulls and dragons in colorful relief. Each animal represents a different god of the Babylonian pantheon, symbolically guarding the entrance to the empire's capital. At the city's center, an immense tower nearly 300 feet tall rises toward the sky, built in layers of sun-baked brick and dedicated to the Babylonian gods. It's probably the tallest structure Daniel has ever seen in his entire life. The Euphrates River splits Babylon exactly down the middle, its 2 banks joined by stone bridges resting on massive pillars. Boats loaded with grain, cloth, and precious metals crowd the water, driving the trade of the greatest empire in the known world. The city holds granaries able to feed the entire population through up to 20 years of siege. Babylonian engineers thought through every possible detail to make sure the empire would never fall to famine or to a war too long for its enemies to endure. For a teenager who only knew the narrow streets of Jerusalem, this was unimaginable. Babylon is, without question, the largest and richest city in the known world, with nearly 200,000 people. Daniel walks through its gates knowing his life will never be the same again. In the palace, Daniel and the other young men enter an intensive 3-year program. They'll learn the language and literature of the Chaldeans, Babylonia's most learned people. As a reward, they're given the privilege of eating the very same food served at the king's own table. In the palace, teachers train Daniel and his friends to speak Aramaic, the official language of Babylonian administration, and to read and write on thousands of clay tablets using cuneiform script, tiny wedge-shaped marks pressed into the clay while it's still wet. The Chaldeans are considered the finest astronomers of the ancient world. Watching the sky night after night from atop their towers, they manage to predict solar and lunar eclipses with striking precision, long before either phenomenon actually happens in the sky. The Babylonians have kept continuous astronomical records for centuries, building the longest record of celestial observation in all of antiquity. And here's a detail almost nobody knows. All that wisdom of the stars is about to be tested by a dream no star can explain. Curiously, the word Chaldean carries 2 meanings in Babylon. It names a specific people from the south, but it also became a byword for sage, astrologer, and royal advisor, even for outsiders who mastered the arts of divination and astronomy. Every day, trays piled with fine meats and choice wine arrive for the young Hebrews. It looks like a reward, but it's also a quiet trap. By eating from the king's table, each young man would slowly be accepting Babylon's gods and customs as his own. And there's more. The chief of the eunuchs changes their names. Daniel, meaning God is my judge, becomes Belteshazzar. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah receive the names Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, a clear attempt to erase these young Hebrews' identity and their faith. Each new name carries religious weight. Belteshazzar honors the god Bel, Babylon's chief deity. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego invoke other Babylonian gods, like Aku and Nebo. This isn't just a name change. It's an attempt to erase these young Hebrews' faith. To the Babylonians, it's just an administrative formality. But for Daniel and his friends, silently accepting that name would mean slowly accepting foreign gods in place of the God of Israel. Changing the name at its core was an attempt to change the soul too. But Daniel makes a bold choice. He resolves in his heart not to defile himself with the king's food and wine. That meat had likely been offered to Babylonian idols, and accepting it would mean breaking with everything he believed about his own God. But refusing the king's food could mean instant death. So Daniel acts with wisdom, not rebellion. He approaches the chief of the eunuchs and proposes something simple: swap the meat and wine for vegetables and water for a trial period, without causing any scandal. The chief of the eunuchs fears for his own head if the young men grow weak. But Daniel insists just 10 days. If at the end they look worse than the others, he'll accept the consequences himself. It's a calculated bet, built on faith, not blind stubbornness. 10 days later, the result surprises everyone. Daniel and his 3 friends look healthier and stronger than all the other young men who ate the royal food. From that day on, the chief of the eunuchs lets the group keep their vegetables and water, without any fear. At the end of the 3 years of study, Nebuchadnezzar summons every graduate for a personal exam. The result is stunning. In wisdom and knowledge, Daniel and his friends are found 10 times superior to every magician and diviner in the entire Babylonian Empire. The final exam covers specific disciplines: astrology, dream interpretation, omens, and sacred writing. Exactly the fields royal advisors relied on to guide decisions about war, marriage, and government. Even on this foreign ground, Daniel and his friends outperform every single rival. In chapter 2 of Daniel, King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream so disturbing it robs him of sleep completely. He can't forget the images, yet strangely, he can't recall the exact details either. It leaves him terrified, convinced something serious is about to happen to his kingdom. Interpreting royal dreams is no small matter in Babylon. It's serious political practice. Kings typically keep dozens of professional interpreters on staff at the palace, because a misread dream can mean war, betrayal, or the collapse of an entire government within days. At dawn, the king summons magicians, astrologers, enchanters, and sages from across Babylon to the palace. He demands an immediate answer. Someone must tell him what that dream means. Dozens of advisors kneel before the throne, with no idea of the trap about to be revealed. Nebuchadnezzar summons 4 separate groups of royal advisors: magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and Chaldean sages, each specialized in a distinct method of divination. Together, they formed the intellectual elite responsible for interpreting signs, dreams, and omens for the entire Babylonian Empire. Then comes the impossible ultimatum. Nebuchadnezzar demands the sages not only interpret the dream, but also guess exactly what he dreamed, with no clues at all. Did you know the king suspected his magicians of inventing convenient interpretations? So he wanted a test no one could fake. The sages panic. Almost in unison, they answer that no man on earth can reveal a king's dream without first hearing it. They argue that only the gods themselves could know such a thing, and no god lives among ordinary men. The answer enrages the king. Seized by fury, Nebuchadnezzar decrees something extreme. Every sage in Babylon is to be executed without exception. It's not just punishment for the men in that room. It's a death sentence against the entire intellectual elite of the greatest empire on earth. And here's a detail almost nobody knows. The man in charge of carrying out the sentence is Arioch, captain of the king's personal guard, the most feared man in the entire palace. It's through him, not some ordinary messenger, that news of the executions begins to spread. Most shocking of all, the decree reaches even Daniel and his 3 friends, who hadn't even been called to that meeting. Royal soldiers receive orders to hunt down and kill every sage in Babylon, and the time for Daniel to find a way out is quickly running out. When Arioch arrives to carry out the order, Daniel doesn't panic or run. With tact and respect, he asks why the decree is so harsh and urgent. His calm answer impresses the captain, who agrees to take Daniel straight into the king's own presence. Facing a death sentence, Daniel acts with courage. Instead of fleeing or hiding, he requests a direct audience with the king and asks for more time. It's an extraordinary move, asking for time from a furious monarch who had just condemned every sage to death. With time granted, Daniel rushes to his friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Together, They spend the night in intense prayer, asking the God of heaven to reveal the mystery of the dream and spare their lives, along with every sage condemned to death. Before he even rushes back to the palace, Daniel stops to praise God. Blessed be the name of God, for wisdom and power belong to him. He is the one who changes times and seasons, who removes kings from their thrones and sets up others in their place. That same night, the mystery is revealed to Daniel in a vision. He finally sees what the king dreamed. Before he even runs to the palace, Daniel stops to praise God, thanking him for the wisdom and power revealed, recognizing the answer didn't come from his own intellect. Before Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel doesn't hesitate. He declares with firm conviction that there's a God in heaven able to reveal mysteries no magician, astrologer, or diviner could ever decipher. The whole room, full of skeptical advisors, hangs on every word from the young Hebrew before the throne. An important detail: Daniel never claims to have special powers. He makes clear before the entire court that the revelation didn't come from his own wisdom but from God alone. That humility contrasts sharply with the arrogance of the magicians who had just failed before the king. Daniel also reveals something surprising to the king himself. It was the God of heaven who gave him this power, this strength, and this glory, granting him dominion over men, over the beasts of the field, and even over the birds of the sky, wherever they live. Then, without hesitation, Daniel starts describing exactly what the king had dreamed, detail by detail, something no other person on earth could have known. Absolute silence falls over the room. Even Nebuchadnezzar, on his throne, sits frozen, hearing his own mind read aloud. Daniel describes the vision: a colossal, terrifying statue shining before the king. Its head is made of the purest, most brilliant gold there is, representing something magnificent. And this is only the beginning of a prophetic image about to reveal the future of entire empires. Moving down the statue's body, the chest and arms are silver, a valuable metal but visibly inferior to gold. Further down, the belly and thighs are gleaming bronze. Each material represents a different kingdom, each one less glorious than the one before it. The statue's legs are iron, strong enough to crush anything in its path. But the feet hide a fatal weakness. They're made of iron mixed with clay, a combination that looks strong but is, in truth, destined to shatter into pieces. Suddenly, a stone breaks loose from a mountain, but no human hand cut it free. It strikes the statue's weak feet dead on, shattering everything instantly. The fragments turn to dust carried off by the wind, and the stone grows into a mountain that fills the whole earth. Daniel then reveals the meaning. Looking straight at the king, he declares, "You are that head of gold." After Nebuchadnezzar, other empires will rise, each technically stronger in military power, yet morally weaker and more divided, until reaching those brittle feet of iron and clay. Further down the statue, the silver represents the Second Empire, a kingdom formed by the union of two different peoples, the Medes and the Persians. Together, they'll conquer much of the ancient world, but never with the same absolute, centralized brilliance of Babylon's gold. Remember this detail because it comes back later. That same Medo-Persian Empire will conquer Babylon itself just a few decades on. And Daniel, by then an old man, will witness up close the fall of the empire he has served since youth. The conquest will happen in a way almost impossible to foresee. Enemy armies will divert the course of the Euphrates itself, the same river that splits the city in half, slipping beneath the walls through the riverbed at night without anyone noticing at all. The bronze announces the Third Empire, Greece. Centuries later, a young general will conquer nearly the entire known world at astonishing speed, seizing vast territories before he even turns 30 years old, a feat never once repeated in ancient history. This empire will spread the Greek language across 3 entire continents, uniting peoples who previously couldn't even communicate with each other. Centuries later, that same Greek language would be used to write the Gospels of the New Testament, carrying the message of Jesus to the whole world. The Iron is the fourth empire, the most ruthless of all, Rome, a military power capable of crushing any nation that dared to resist. And it's precisely under the rule of this Iron Empire that, centuries later, Jesus Christ would be born in the small town of Bethlehem. But the feet of iron mixed with clay reveal an unavoidable weakness. In the end, these empires will fracture into divided kingdoms, which try to reunite through alliances and royal marriages, but never actually manage to become one truly united people. Notice one crucial detail of the vision. The stone that strikes the statue breaks loose from the mountain on its own, with no human hand cutting it. This means the kingdom it represents isn't born of armies, politics, or human effort, but directly from the will of God. After crushing the entire statue, the stone keeps growing and growing until it becomes a vast mountain that fills the whole earth. This is how God describes his kingdom. It starts small, almost invisible to the eyes of the world, but never stops growing until it dominates everything. Think about that for a moment. This entire sequence of empires was announced centuries before it happened, in a single night, to an exiled teenager who dared to trust God. In a sense, the history of the world was already written before it even began to unfold. And the prophecy's ending is the most astonishing part. In the days of the final kingdoms, the God of heaven will raise up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. Did you know historians confirm this exact sequence: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, fulfilled in precisely that order? What happens next is shocking. The most powerful king in the world kneels before an exiled teenager. Nebuchadnezzar falls prostrate before Daniel and publicly declares that his God is, in truth, the God of gods and the Lord over every king on earth. The impact is so great that Nebuchadnezzar goes beyond a simple bow. He actually orders an offering and incense presented to Daniel, almost as if that young Hebrew were himself a god. The gesture shows just how enormous that revelation truly was. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego take over the administration of the province of Babylon, while Daniel stays at the royal court, right at the king's own gate. Remember this detail. It explains why, in the next great trial, only 3 of these names will stand alone facing the danger. As his reward, Daniel becomes governor of Babylon's entire province and supreme chief of the empire's sages. At his request, his 3 friends rise to high office too. But the next test wouldn't come in a dream, it would come in a furnace heated 7 times hotter. Chapter 3 opens years after the statue dream. But Nebuchadnezzar never forgot that image and decided to build his own. On the plain of Dura, he raises a colossal statue made entirely of gold, 27 meters tall as a 9-story building. Here's a striking detail. In the original dream, only the statue's head was made of pure gold. Nebuchadnezzar built this new statue entirely of gold, a direct challenge to the prophecy that said his empire would one day come to an end. Another odd detail: 27 meters tall but less than 3 meters wide is an impossible ratio for any normal human body. Scholars believe the statue actually stood atop a massive stone pedestal, which would explain these strangely disproportionate, elongated measurements. A royal herald announces the king's order to the entire empire. When the orchestra plays horn, flute, harp, and other instruments, every person must kneel before the golden statue. Anyone who refuses to worship will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. This decree wasn't just for the city of Babylon. It applied to every people, nation, and language across the entire empire, a territory of staggering size. Never before had a king tried to impose a single act of worship on so many different peoples at once. The music plays and thousands drop to the ground as one body, in a single wave. But 3 men remain standing: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Here's a curiosity. The Bible never explains where Daniel was that day. He simply doesn't appear in the scene. The first to rush and denounce the three aren't soldiers or common spies. They're the very Chaldean court sages Daniel had already outshone years earlier in another episode. Professional jealousy weighs just as heavily as religion in this calculated accusation. Nebuchadnezzar hears the accusation, furious, and summons the three before him, giving one more chance to obey. Their answer goes down as one of the boldest in the Bible. Our God is able to save us from the fire, but even if he doesn't, we will not bow. Worth remembering who these three were. Years earlier, Daniel himself had asked the king to promote Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to administrators of the province of Babylon. Now, the very loyalty that put them in power is exactly what threatens their lives. The king loses patience and orders something brutal. Heat the furnace 7 times hotter than normal. The heat becomes so extreme that the very soldiers who bind and throw the 3 men inside die instantly, burned by flames shooting from the furnace's mouth. A curious detail from the biblical account: the soldiers bind the 3 men not just with ordinary ropes, but with their own robes, turbans, and official clothing still worn. Every bound piece of clothing becomes important minutes later, when the furnace is opened. The king peers into the fire, astonished. He expected 3 bodies, but he counts 4 men walking free without a single burn, and the 4th looked like a son of the gods. The full story is in another video on this channel, link in the description. The furnace rescue becomes legend across the whole empire. But this wouldn't be the last time a Babylonian king had a terrifying encounter with this foreign god. The next one would come in the form of a dream, even more disturbing than any furnace. When the 3 step out of the furnace, the people notice something impossible. Not even the smell of smoke clings to them. Only the ropes that bound them had burned away completely. Their hair, clothing, and skin remained completely untouched, without a single mark of fire. Astonished, Nebuchadnezzar decrees national protection for this foreign god. Anyone, from any people, who speaks against him will be torn apart and their house reduced to rubble. After that, the king promotes Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to even higher positions in the province. In chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar has another disturbing dream. He sees an immense tree at the center of the earth, so tall it touches the sky, visible even from the ends of the world. Birds nest in its branches. Wild animals find shelter and rest in its shade. In the original text, the heavenly being in this dream is called a watcher, one of the holy ones, beings who watch over heaven and carry out divine decisions, mentioned only in this one part of the entire Bible. This watcher shouts the order that terrifies the king. In the dream, a heavenly messenger descends and shouts a shocking order: cut down this tree, chop off its branches, scatter its fruit, but leave the stump and roots in the ground, bound with iron and bronze, amid the grass of the field. The king wakes terrified. The voice continues, stranger still: let this man's heart be changed into the heart of an animal, and let 7 times pass over him, until he acknowledges that the Most High rules over every kingdom on earth. Nebuchadnezzar wakes in a panic and summons all his sages. A curious detail about these 7 times. Scholars comparing this to other prophecies in the book of Daniel believe each time represents 1 full year. In other words, 7 times likely means 7 whole years living as an animal, far from the throne and human reason. The king gathers magicians, astrologers, and diviners from all of Babylon and tells them the tree dream. But this time, with no death threat in the air, none of them dare to guess. They simply stand in silence, glancing at each other, too afraid to speak. Finally, they call for Daniel, known at the Babylonian court by the name Belteshazzar. He hears the dream and understands it instantly. But unlike other times, he falls silent for a moment, pale, troubled. The king notices and says, "Don't be afraid to tell me." Daniel tells the truth without hesitation. "The tree is you, O king." Your greatness has grown until it touches the sky, but you will be cut down and live 7 times as an animal. Then comes his boldest advice yet. Abandon your sins, and your peace may continue. Here's a striking curiosity. The condition described in this dream is actually recognized by modern medicine. There are documented cases of people developing the delusion of literally believing themselves to be animals, a rare disorder psychiatrists still record to this day. Another detail still puzzles historians. Throughout all 7 times, with the king incapacitated and absent, no coup manages to topple the Babylonian throne. In an ancient world where empty thrones always attracted rivals, this period of stability seems almost inexplicable. 12 months pass. Nebuchadnezzar ignores Daniel's warning, and life goes on as normal, prosperous, luxurious. One evening, he walks alone on the terrace of his immense royal palace in Babylon. Gazing at the city he himself turned into the most powerful and magnificent in the entire world. Daniel's warning still echoes in the king's mind, but his pride speaks louder than any prophecy. And what happens in the next few minutes, right there on that very terrace, will show just how far one man's arrogance can truly go. Looking out over the temples, the hanging gardens, and the massive walls, the king swells with pride and declares out loud, "Is this not the great Babylon that I myself built, by my own power, for the glory of my majesty and my name?" The words are still on the king's lips when something happens. A voice from heaven answers, loud and firm, echoing across the palace. It announces that the kingdom has just been taken from him in that exact second. No warning, no second chance. Time has run out. In that instant, before the terrified eyes of his own servants, the mind of the most powerful man in the world simply switches off. The king who ruled empires, who raised golden statues, who decided who lived or died, becomes, in seconds, a creature with no reason left. His own servants drive him out of the palace. For 7 times, the former king of Babylon lives like a wild animal, far from any human comfort. He eats grass like cattle, crawling on all 4s among the herds, sleeping outdoors, exposed to rain and sun. His hair grows and grows until it resembles the feathers of a giant eagle. His nails take the shape of a bird of prey's claws. Meanwhile, in the capital, the counselors hide the secret of the empty throne, inventing excuses, keeping up appearances that all is under control. Here's a curiosity few people know. Ancient Babylonian records themselves speak of a mysterious period when the king simply vanished from public life, with no official explanation. Historians still debate today what really happened during those missing years of recorded Babylonian history. After the 7 times pass, something changes. Out in the field, still a wild animal, the former king lifts his eyes to heaven. And in that same instant, his reason returns. His mind clears. His consciousness awakens. He recognizes that a power greater than his own exists. The restoration happens fast. The same counselors who hid the empty throne go out to the field, find him, and put him back where he was before. A rare outcome for a deposed ruler in the ancient world, where lost thrones almost never return to the same hands. Restored to the throne, Nebuchadnezzar does something unprecedented. He publishes a decree to the entire empire, openly praising the Most High God. And here's quite a curiosity. Did you know this chapter is the only passage in the whole Bible written in first person by a pagan king? There's another curious detail hidden in this passage. This specific part of the book of Daniel wasn't written in Hebrew, like the rest of the Bible, but in Aramaic, that empire's international language, a piece of sacred text preserved in a completely different tongue. Not long after, Nebuchadnezzar dies, and the empire he spent decades building starts to crumble fast. In just 23 years, a succession of weak kings, internal betrayals, and palace coups melt away Babylonian power, once considered nearly indestructible by the whole world. After kings who passed through the throne too quickly, Belshazzar emerges, young, arrogant, more interested in lavish parties than in governing wisely. He inherits the title of king, but nowhere near the vision, discipline, or respect that Nebuchadnezzar once had. Belshazzar doesn't know it yet, but he's about to make a mistake that will cost him not only his reign, but his own life in a single night. And it all begins, without any warning, with a feast he throws to impress his most powerful guests. Belshazzar is called the son of Nebuchadnezzar, but the term also applied to a successor. In practice, he already ruled Babylon as co-regent, while his father commanded troops far from the capital. For centuries, skeptics even doubted Belshazzar existed, until clay tablets confirmed his exact name. And Daniel? He's still alive, now an elderly man, carrying decades of experience and accumulated wisdom. But the new generation at the Babylonian court doesn't even remember his name. He's pushed aside, forgotten in the palace corridors, as if his entire story never happened there. In chapter 5, Belshazzar throws a massive banquet for 1,000 of his nobles. At the height of the drinking, he makes an unforgivable mistake. He brings out the sacred cups, stolen from Jerusalem's temple decades earlier, and uses them to pour wine for his drunken guests. The biblical account is very specific about this moment. It's not just the king and nobles who drink. Belshazzar's wives and concubines also drink wine straight from the sacred cups, right there, in front of everyone, making the desecration even more public and scandalous. Mid-feast, fingers of a human hand appear from nowhere and right on the wall, by candlelight. The king turns pale with terror. Amid the panic, the queen mother enters and reminds him of a man in the kingdom with the spirit of the holy gods. Desperate, Belshazzar promises rewards to whoever can decipher the writing. A purple robe, a gold chain, and third place in the kingdom. Third, not second, because second place already belonged to him, the co-regent king, while his father remained away commanding troops outside the capital. Daniel is summoned and, without hesitation, reads the mysterious words on the wall. Mean, tekel, parsin. It's devastating. God has numbered the days of Belshazzar's reign, weighed his character on the scales and found it wanting. His kingdom will be divided between the Medes and Persians. Before even interpreting anything, Daniel politely refuses the king's gifts. Keep your rewards for yourself, or give them to someone else. Even in that tense moment, he makes it clear his loyalty was never for sale, not for gold and not for power. That very night, while the feast still raged inside, Persian soldiers divert the Euphrates and enter the city along its dry bed, without firing a single arrow. Mighty Babylon falls without a battle. The full banquet story is in another video on this channel, link in the description. An ancient Greek historian recorded a striking detail about that night. The city was so massive that residents in its farthest districts only learned the capital had fallen days later, going about their lives normally while power had already changed hands. With Babylon's fall, a new ruler takes power. Darius the Mede, a 62-year-old man, experienced and strategic. He inherits a massive, newly conquered empire, full of different peoples, different languages, and a capital that still holds many secrets from the fallen regime. Here's a real historical mystery. To this day, scholars debate exactly who Darius the Mede was. No Persian or Babylonian record outside the Bible cites that exact name in that way, making this figure one of the greatest enigmas in all of biblical archaeology. Some theories try to explain the puzzle. Some scholars believe Darius was another name or title used by a trusted governor placed on Babylon's throne. Others think he was an entirely separate figure. None of these theories, even today, fully convinces everyone. Darius reorganizes the empire's entire administrative structure. He appoints 120 satraps to govern the provinces, all closely watched by just 3 trusted supervisors. And surprisingly, one of those 3 is Daniel, the same man who alone had already outlasted two different empires. This system had a very clear purpose. Each satrap handled taxes and local laws in his province, but answered directly to one of the three supervisors. This way, no regional governor could accumulate too much power alone or hide corruption for long without being caught. Even at around 80 years old, Daniel stands out above every other supervisor and satrap in the entire empire. His wisdom, his integrity, and his extraordinary spirit impress King Darius so much that he begins planning something bold, putting Daniel in charge of everything. It's worth pausing on something rare. At 80, Daniel had already survived the height and fall of Babylon, and now thrived under an entirely new Persian regime. Few people in ancient history lived through so many changes of power while keeping their influence and reputation intact. But this news doesn't sit well with the other leaders of the empire. Jealousy explodes behind palace doors. How could a foreigner, a Hebrew exile with no noble blood, be placed above every Persian and Mede noble born to rule that land? It's worth understanding the scale of this conspiracy. This isn't one lone rival. All 120 satraps, together with the other supervisors, unite secretly against one single man. Foreign, elderly, yet impossible to defeat by any honest means they tried. The conspirators start combing through every detail of Daniel's public life, hunting for any scandal, administrative error, or misused funds. But they find absolutely nothing. In roughly 70 years in power, serving different kings and empires, Daniel never committed a single act of corruption. They dig through financial records, provincial reports, old contracts, and even forgotten legal disputes, searching for any trace of a mistake. After examining entire decades of public work, the conspirators come up empty-handed, frustrated by a record too flawless to be real. Frustrated, the conspirators reach a revealing conclusion, almost a disguised compliment. We will never find any charge against this man, unless it has to do with the law of his God. Daniel's own unshakable faith becomes the only possible target for attack. Now they need a perfect plan. Something that looks like an honor to the king, not religious persecution against Daniel. And the missing piece to close this trap is exactly Darius's vanity, newly on the throne and hungry for absolute recognition. Here's a crucial detail. Under the law of the Medes and Persians, once the king signs a decree, not even he can undo it afterward. It's a unique legal rule of that empire, and exactly this detail is what will spring the trap on Daniel. They set the perfect trap. They convince King Darius to sign a 30-day decree banning prayer to any god or man except the king himself, on pain of death in the lion's den. Flattered by such an honor, Darius signs without seeing the trap. The wording of the decree was very specific. For 30 days, no one in the empire could direct a request, a prayer, or a wish to any god or person except the king himself. Worded that way, it sounded like a tribute of honor, not a personal trap. Vanity works exactly as the conspirators predicted. No newly crowned king can resist being treated, even for just 30 days, almost like a god. It was this hunger for greatness that made Darius sign his own trap without seeing the danger hidden inside it. Daniel learns of the signed decree that very same day. Even so, he goes up to his room, opens the windows facing toward Jerusalem, and kneels to pray 3 times a day, exactly as he had always done throughout his entire life. Daniel knows exactly what this decree means and what the penalty would be. Even so, nothing in his routine changes, not for a single second. And this one decision, made in silence inside his own room, is about to put his life on a collision course. Kneeling in prayer with the windows facing Jerusalem wasn't just any gesture for Daniel. This practice dated back centuries, tied to the dedication prayer of Solomon's ancient temple, a tradition he kept alive even far from home, in a foreign land. And there's a cruel irony in all this. The same irrevocable law the conspirators created as a weapon against Daniel also traps them. Once sealed, Not even the ones who set the trap can go back or soften the punishment, even if they later regret it. The conspirators don't act on the very first day. Instead, they wait, silently watching Daniel's 3 daily prayer times, repeated day after day, quietly gathering enough undeniable proof before finally rushing to bring their accusation straight to King Darius himself. They know a mere rumor wouldn't be enough to convince the king to punish his most respected advisor. So they need to catch Daniel in the exact act of prayer, with witnesses present, proof irrefutable enough to force Darius to act against his own will. Everything is ready. The decree signed, Daniel's routine known, the exact times mapped out. Only one thing remains to close this carefully laid trap. To see, with their own eyes, the exact moment Daniel kneels down to pray once more. He doesn't hide. He doesn't close the windows. He doesn't change his prayer time, not even for a single day. And down in the street, hidden among the palace shadows, the conspirators watch his every move, counting the minutes until they finally get the proof they've waited for. Chapter 6 opens with the trap sprung. The conspirators climb to Daniel's house and find exactly what they expected. The old statesman kneeling at his open window, praying 3 times a day, facing Jerusalem, exactly as he always had, hiding nothing from anyone. The officials rush to the throne and remind Darius of a fatal detail. No law signed by the Medes and Persians can be revoked, not even by the king who created it. Darius realizes, too late, that he's fallen into the very trap he signed himself. Darius spends the whole day searching for a loophole in his own law, consulting advisors, poring over every word of the decree, trying to find any legal way out to save the friend he trusted most. But he built a perfect trap himself, and now there's no escape. Guards lead Daniel through the streets of the capital, and the whole city already knows what's coming. No one shouts, no one protests. A heavy silence follows the old statesman's steps to the mouth of the den, as if everyone feared what was about to begin. At sunset, the guards bring Daniel to the lion's den. At 80 years old, the most respected man in Persia is led like a common criminal to the dark mouth of the stone pit, under the gaze of a silent crowd. Bound with thick ropes, Daniel is lowered slowly into the dark den. Down below, the lions are already stirring in the shadows, sensing a new presence. The sound of heavy paws on stone echoes through the whole pit as he descends. Before Daniel goes down, Darius says one last line, almost pleading, "Your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you." Then a massive stone is rolled over the mouth of the den, sealed with the king's own signet ring and the rings of his nobles. But here's a detail few notice. Centuries later, another stone would be sealed with a governor's authority, guarding a tomb just outside Jerusalem. And just like Daniel's den, that stone would also fail completely to hold back what was inside. The Persian custom for this sealing was strict. Several nobles pressed their own rings into the wax alongside the king's, precisely so that no one, not even Darius, could open that stone alone later and change Daniel's fate during the night. That would become the longest night of Darius's entire reign. Back at the palace, he refuses his usual banquet, orders the musicians silenced, and can't sleep for even a minute, pacing restlessly back and forth, thinking only of the dark stone pit. In the first hours alone in the darkness, Daniel does exactly what he'd done his whole life. He kneels and prays calm, as if he were home by the window, not in a den surrounded by hungry beasts in the middle of the Persian night. In the den, an 80-year-old man is surrounded by hungry lions in total darkness. But an angel in white robes descends and shuts the mouth of each beast, one by one, turning what should have been a death sentence into a night of peace. The angel doesn't appear just to shut the lions' mouths. He stays there all night, right beside Daniel, because God had already judged the case. The old statesman had been found innocent, and no beast in that den would touch him before dawn. And here's what almost no one tells you. while the most powerful king in the region tossed sleeplessly in his own golden palace. The man locked in a stone den, surrounded by lions, probably slept better than he did that entire night. At the palace, it's well past midnight and Darius keeps pacing back and forth, refusing food, sending the musicians away yet again. Servants exchange worried glances, too afraid to say anything, while the most powerful king in the region refuses to sleep. Hold on to this moment. What Darius is about to do at dawn becomes a legend still told today, in books, films, and sermons worldwide. And the answer he's about to hear from that dark pit will surprise even those who already know this story. As soon as the sun rises, Darius doesn't wait for any servant. He runs through the palace corridors himself, crosses the courtyards, and rushes down to the den, his heart pounding, hoping against all logic to find Daniel alive after that impossible night. Darius runs so fast he stumbles twice on the way to the den, not caring at all about his own royal dignity. The guards can barely keep pace with an old king running like a desperate man chasing one last chance at good news. When he arrives, Darius shouts into the dark pit, his voice breaking, "Daniel, servant of the living God, was your God, whom you serve continually, able to deliver you from the lions?" He waits in absolute silence, not knowing if he'll hear an answer. And from the bottom of the darkness, calm and steady, comes a voice no one expected to hear again. "O King, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the mouths of the lions, because I was found innocent before him and also before you." The guards and nobles around Darius freeze, unable to believe what they just heard coming from the bottom of the den. No one expected an answer. Some step back, others exchange glances in total silence, trying to understand if this had really happened. Daniel is lifted out of the den without a single scratch on his body, because he trusted in his God. Not a tooth mark, not a bruise, nothing at all. At 80 years old, he spent the whole night among hungry lions and came out completely unharmed. The news spreads through the capital faster than any messenger could carry it. Residents stumble out still half asleep. Merchants abandon their stalls, everyone running the same direction just to confirm with their own eyes that Daniel truly walked out of that den alive. But there's a detail most illustrations get completely wrong. They almost always show a strong young man in the lion's den. The truth is quite different. The man who spent that night among wild beasts was a white-haired elder, nearly 80 years old. By Darius's order, the men who plotted the conspiracy now face the very fate they planned for Daniel. They're marched to the mouth of that same den, while the lions, still restless, rise slowly from the shadows at the bottom of the stone pit. After this, Darius writes a letter to every people, nation, and language across the whole earth. Daniel's God is the living God, and his kingdom will never be destroyed. He becomes the second pagan king in history to decree public praise to the God of Israel. After that night, Daniel keeps serving Darius, now trusted even more than before. The very king who signed the law that nearly killed him starts treating him as the most valuable advisor in the whole empire, right up to the end of his reign. When power passes into the hands of Cyrus the Persian, Daniel loses no ground at all. He keeps thriving under the new reign too, respected by two different rulers from two different peoples, in a political career that spans entire empires without ever losing anyone's trust. But the most astonishing nights of Daniel's life didn't happen in the lion's den. They happened in visions so intense that even he could barely explain what he saw. And what Daniel witnessed on those nights has reached us today, exactly as it was written. In chapter 7, years before the den, in the first year of Belshazzar, Daniel has a terrifying dream. A raging sea, whipped by winds from all four corners of heaven, and from within those dark, violent waters, for gigantic beasts begin rising one by one. The first beast is a colossal lion with eagle wings. The second, a massive, lopsided bear with 3 ribs clenched between its teeth. The third is a swift leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. And the fourth is the most terrifying of all. The first beast in that dream, the lion with eagle wings, represented Babylon itself, the empire where Daniel lived when he had that vision. Years later, the wings would be torn off, an image of a proud kingdom that would lose all the strength it once had. The second beast, the lopsided bear with 3 ribs clenched in its teeth, represented the Medo-Persian Empire, the very one Daniel would later serve. The 3 ribs symbolized 3 great conquests that empire would achieve before reaching the height of its power. The fourth beast has iron teeth, 10 horns, and crushes everything in its path, unlike any known animal. And here's the most striking part. Each of these 4 beasts represented an empire that, at the moment of the vision, hadn't even begun to exist yet. The third beast, the swift leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads, represented Greece, an army so fast that no other people of that era could catch it in battle. The 4 heads announced, centuries in advance, that this empire would one day split into 4 parts. The fourth beast, with no name of any known animal, iron teeth and 10 horns, represented Rome, the most violent and most enduring of all 4 empires. It would crush whatever remained of the previous empires, exactly as Daniel had seen in that terrifying night. Among the 10 horns of that fourth beast, a small horn appears, different from the others, with almost human eyes and a mouth speaking arrogant things. Scholars still debate this detail of the vision today, because many believe it points to a time still far in the future. The scene shifts completely. Daniel sees the Ancient of Days seated on a throne of flames with wheels of pure fire, and a river of fire flowing out before him. Millions upon millions of heavenly beings serve there, in a crowd impossible to count, in absolute reverent silence. Books are opened before the throne, and the judgment begins. Daniel stands there, in the middle of God's own throne room, seeing what no other prophet had ever described that way. And somehow he survives the encounter and returns to write it all down. Then someone like the Son of Man appears, coming on the clouds of heaven, receiving dominion, glory, and an eternal kingdom over every people, nation, and language. And here's the key detail. Centuries later, this would become the title Jesus used for himself more than any other. But this wasn't the only time Daniel saw entire empires rise and fall in a single vision. Another dream, even more detailed, was still to come, with named battles, exact counts of years, and even a general who would reshape the map of the world alone. In another vision, Daniel sees a powerful 2-horned ram knocked down by a goat moving so fast it barely touches the ground, charging in from the west with a notable horn between its eyes. Every detail described empires that wouldn't be born for centuries. In the ram of that new vision, the 2 uneven horns represented the Medes and Persians united as a single power, with one horn growing taller than the other, exactly as happened when the Persians came to dominate the alliance and rule the entire empire alone. The goat charging in from the west, moving so fast it seems to never touch the ground, represented Greece rising as a military power. No army in the region had ever seen a force move eastward with that kind of stunning speed before. The notable horn between the goat's eyes represented a single man, Alexander the Great, who would march out of Greece and conquer nearly the entire known world in just over 10 years, a pace of conquest ancient history had never seen before. But Alexander dies at the absolute height of his power, still young, at only 32 years old, leaving behind no heir strong enough to hold an empire that size alone. And that's exactly where the vision of the goat keeps being fulfilled. The notable horn breaks off, and in its place 4 smaller horns grow, pointing toward the 4 corners of the world. They represented the generals who would divide Alexander's empire among themselves, each one taking a share after the conqueror's sudden death. Each of the 4 generals received a slice of the conquered territory, and one of them inherited the very region where Jerusalem stood. It was there that the final details of that vision would keep being fulfilled, shaping the politics of Israel for generations to come. The most astonishing detail of all is the date. This vision was written roughly 200 years before Alexander was even born. No one in Daniel's time knew his name, yet the details of the conquest and the division were already recorded centuries in advance. What's most striking is that history, centuries later, would confirm exact details of that vision about kings and empires that didn't even exist yet. But the weight of what Daniel saw was so great that he fell physically ill, bedridden and drained of strength, for several days straight. In chapter 9, now quite elderly, Daniel studies the scrolls of the prophet Jeremiah and discovers something urgent. The 70 years of exile promised for the people of Israel are about to end. That discovery changes everything, and he decides he must act immediately before God. Daniel responds the way he always did, with fasting, rough sackcloth, and one of the most beautiful prayers in the entire Bible, confessing his own people's failures with striking humility. He asks for nothing for himself, only mercy for the nation he loved so deeply. Before Daniel even finishes speaking, the angel Gabriel arrives, flying swiftly to his side. Did you know Gabriel is the first angel called by name anywhere in the Bible? And this is exactly where he appears, bringing the prophecy of the 70 weeks until the Messiah. Gabriel's message isn't just words of comfort. It's an exact count. Weeks of years adding up to entire centuries, pointing to the precise moment when the Messiah would finally appear among the people, centuries after that conversation between the angel and Daniel. And there's a part of the prophecy no one expected to hear. That same count from Gabriel didn't end just with the Messiah's arrival. It ended with him being put to death, a shocking detail Daniel recorded centuries before anything like it actually happened. Even today, scholars who work through Gabriel's math themselves, counting the weeks of years from the Persian decree, keep landing on exactly the same era when Jesus was born, preached, and died in Jerusalem. And that wouldn't even be the most frightening vision Daniel would have. In chapter 10, on the banks of the Tigris River, Daniel sees a man dressed in pure linen, his face blazing like lightning and his eyes like torches of fire. It's so intense that the men around Daniel flee in terror, even without understanding what they saw. Alone before the vision, Daniel loses all strength in his body and falls face down on the ground, unable to move or even speak. That being's brightness is so overwhelming that no ordinary human could stand before him for very long. And here's what almost no one tells you. The messenger reveals he was held back for 21 full days by a spiritual prince of Persia, until the archangel Michael came to help. While Daniel prayed with no apparent answer, a completely invisible war was raging in the heavens. The messenger himself explains the reason for the delay. Michael, described as one of the most important princes of heaven, had to come help before he could break free from that spiritual resistance and finally reach Daniel with the answer he'd been waiting weeks for. This is one of the most unique passages in the entire Bible. Nowhere else shows in such detail a spiritual war unfolding behind the scenes of national politics, while the humans involved have no idea what's actually being decided in the heavens. While Daniel had been fasting for 3 weeks, not understanding why no answer came, an entire war was being waged in the heavens because of him, without him knowing a thing about it. And this wouldn't be the last time the invisible backstage would appear in his visions. Daniel's final visions describe kings of the north and south, wars, broken alliances, and betrayals, with such striking precision that skeptical scholars still doubt the date the book was actually written, insisting it reads like a record, not a prophecy. Among his final visions, Daniel describes a contemptible king who would later rise among the kings of the north, a cruel and deceitful ruler who would go so far as to defile the sacred temple itself, fulfilling one of the harshest parts of this whole final prophecy. Centuries later, historians were able to confirm that the events Daniel described happened exactly as written, with such precise dating that even the most skeptical critics of the prophecy had to admit the striking match between the text and the historical facts. And in the final chapter comes a promise that had never appeared quite that way anywhere in the entire Old Testament. Many who sleep in the dust of the earth will awaken, some to everlasting life, and others to shame and everlasting horror. That same final vision promises something more beyond the resurrection. The wise, those who helped others live rightly, will shine forever like the stars of heaven, in one of the most beautiful images of eternal reward in all of ancient prophetic literature. The final order Daniel receives is direct. Seal the book until the time of the end. You will go to your rest and rise again to claim your inheritance at the end of days. God doesn't free Daniel from exile, but promises to raise him later. Daniel survived 4 different kings and 2 entire empires, nearly 70 years at the top of power without a single recorded scandal. He never got to return to Jerusalem, the city he loved so much. But in heaven, an angel called him greatly beloved. Late in life, still during the reign of Cyrus, Daniel sees something few prophets ever have the privilege of witnessing. The very decree authorizing the Jewish people to return to Jerusalem, published right before his own eyes after decades of exile. The 70 years Daniel had read about in the scrolls of the prophet Jeremiah, decades earlier, are fulfilled right before his eyes. But Daniel himself, now far too old for the long journey, never makes it back to the Jerusalem he loved his whole life. Daniel dies of old age in Persia, likely past 90 years old, after faithfully serving through nearly all of his long life. To this day, a traditional tomb attributed to him still stands in the ancient city of Susa, visited by pilgrims for centuries. Centuries later, Jesus cites Daniel by name before the crowds, a rare reference for an Old Testament prophet. And even in his own lifetime, the prophet Ezekiel, Daniel's contemporary, already cited his name as an example of righteousness, a fame almost no prophet received while still alive. Which of Daniel's nights struck you most? The lion's den, the writing on the wall, or the visions of thrones and beasts? Comment below, subscribe so you don't miss the next stories, and remember, the fiery furnace video and Belshazzar's feast are both here on the channel.